Hi, Peter Mostert. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Emma. Good to see you, and thanks for the invitation.
Can you share a time when you changed a long-held belief and what influenced that change?
Yeah, I think I can. I grew up in Holland, the Netherlands, lived there for many years, and I was really drilled in a planning approach. If you want to do something, you have to plan properly. So later in my professional work, I did the same. If I had to give a class, I prepared it. If I had a meeting, I prepared it. If I went to a party, I tried to prepare it. And then one day, more than 20 years ago, I left the Netherlands and went to South Africa. And what happened is that my planning approach did not work there because planning involves asking other people what can I expect. And they told me stories for good reasons because they thought I was a nice man and they wanted to be nice. I built a planning around what they had told me and it turned out completely different. So I learned, and it was a hard lesson, I can tell you, learned over a couple years to give up a planning approach, but more act on the spot. Like today, face the situation. I didn't ask you, send me your questions so that I can prepare them, which I would have done 20 years ago. What made me change, people, and they behave, they're good people, but they behave in a certain way, and I adapted.
Are there any beliefs then that you feel you won't ever abandon and why?
There is a list of that. And it's not easy to give that the proper names because you quickly end up in all kind of isms. And that's ideology and that's not what I want. But for example, practical again in my life, a vegetarian lifestyle, which I adopted when I went to university and lived on my own for the first time, that will stay with me forever. Wherever I am, I'll manage and do very well in a vegetarian lifestyle. And for me, that hangs together with, and now you get into the difficult words, which I would call the non-violent approach. There is that wonderful book from Marshall Rosenberg, Nonviolent Communication. And when I read that, not so long ago, maybe 10 years ago, I thought, that is what I practice. And that is what I, in all conversations and in all communications with people, really appreciate and want to not only appreciate, but also want to express, want to maintain. And I'm not willing to give that up. For me, there is no room for violence.
My third question is, what does it mean to disagree well?
To disagree well. Well, I would say to disagree well means that a conversation flourishes. Because if I don't disagree at all, conversations become difficult too. Yeah. But if I disagree too much, then I'll close the door and then we won't have a conversation. So for me, disagreeing well means showing that kind of disagreement that's almost like itching, that itches and that draws attention and that may stir some confusion, but also some interest and some motivation to figure out how it is. And then, of course, there are all kinds of disagreement, but that's maybe for later in our conversation. Disagreeing doesn't mean that I say it's the opposite. Disagreement means I say it may be different. And that's a classical distinction in philosophy, yeah, between contradictory, then you contradict each other. And disagree means you see it differently.
And my final question is, how can schools and universities promote good disagreement?
I would say, well, without getting into a long story, by proper teaching. Teacher can show. I grew up with parents who were teachers, and I saw every day, how teachers model. And if a teacher doesn't model but instructs, then it's not going to work. A teacher should model in all kinds of ways. And a teacher should model what it is to disagree well. If you are very adamant about a particular point, the teacher should say, but have you ever thought about a different approach? So he or she should not criticize you, should not say, no, I'm not so sure about that, or what are your reasons? Should say, have you ever considered a different approach? Do you know people with a different approach? You hear? And in that style, the teacher models the attitude of disagreeing well.